balancing in Fire Emblem is a weird little thing. On one hand, having a couple of classes or weapons that are way more powerful than they're meant to be isn't ideal, but on the other, Fire Emblem is a single player game, so at the end of the day it doesn't really matter. Possibly as a result of that, not spending too much time balancing every single combat element of the game was something Intelligent Systems has regularly done, to the point that nearly every Fire Emblem game has one or multiple classes that stick out from the rest. And today we're gonna go past every game and pick that one out. But first, one little rule: classes that are very limitedly available do not count. That means no unique personal classes and also no dancers, freelancers, transporters, etc. We're gonna start in Arcania, of course, where we combine both remakes and original games this time, because I think all three later versions have pretty comparable answers to their original titles. And I know I literally just said that IS hasn't always made balancing a priority, but Shadow Dragon and Blade of Light is actually balanced really well. It's kinda crazy to think about how this is the first ever Fire Emblem title where everything was new, and somehow it is also among the titles with the least obvious winner of all of them. Now, if I really had to pick one, I would go for a certain horse riding class, which tends to be among the best in every single game, but trust me, we're gonna be talking about this class plenty of times over the course of this video, so I instead want to talk about Shadow Dragon DS, which does have a more obvious winner, one that wasn't necessarily in the running in the original due to some growing pain shenanigans regarding growths. Well, that and the fact my pick didn't even exist in the game: sages. In the Famicom game, every unit that is a sage in the remake is a bishop in the original, while in the remake these two classes coexist, although why you would ever use a bishop over a sage is lost on me. Sages are easily the better offensive option, with way more weapon options and better stats, and in a game where healing is, on average, more important than most other Fire Emblem games, and enemy resistances are surprisingly low throughout the entire game, that is a huge boon. It's absolutely not a huge lead like we'll see in some other titles in the video, but based on the circumstances of the game, I would say Sage is the best, the most useful class in Shadow Dragon. For Gaiden and Shadows of Valentia, I once again think the answer is the same, although there is a huge gulf in quality regarding exactly how big the lead is depending on the game. And yeah, it may be a surprise if you've never played these games, but yet are somehow tapped into the old community discourse that archers are bad. But in Valentia, they're absolutely essential, and especially in the remake, snipers are the best by a long shot, pun very much intended. By far the best way to deal with these games' unconventional chapter design, let's put it lightly, is to use bows and arrows that can hit from distance, preferably as far away as possible. And that is exactly why this class is much better in echoes. Longbows and killer bows exist, providing a further boost to what already was the best option in the original game. I don't think there is a single Fire Emblem game out there where it feels like you need a certain class to win as much as here. Well, I guess that technically isn't true for Echoes either. I would not like to play this game without archers. They're simply essential. Arguably the most essential a class has ever been in the history of the series. And then we get to the final original remake combination, Mystery of the Emblem. Out of all three, this is definitely the one where the original game and the remake are closest together. Shadow Dragon and its remake basically have different answers. Gaiden and Echoes have the same, but with a huge gap of quality between them still, while in both mysteries the answer is pretty much the same for pretty much the same reason. Flying units are always good, and another type we will see frequently throughout this video. Their utility is usually unparalleled, and only specific map designs or an ungodly amount of archers can make them less viable. In Mystery, neither of those are a problem whatsoever, and some of the best units in the game just so happen to have a Pegasus underneath them. Pala is elite in both games, Shida is good in the original and borderline broken in the remake, with her seemingly never-ending access to wing spears, and Thracia is, well, not that good, but purely because she can be a Falcon Knight, she's absolutely worth using. I think it's also most definitely worth pointing out that while the Wing Spear and the class Falcon Knight are unavailable in the original game, Pegasus Knights can dismount in Mystery of the Emblem, which obviously is a huge boon and if used correctly, removes one of the only downsides to being a flying unit. So yeah, a very solid kit in both the original and the remake, even if it's nothing completely broken. Considering Genealogy of the Holy Wars chapters and maps are the complete opposite of Echoes, the number one key factor in this game a class has to have to be a contender is movement. which means that, once again, flying classes as well as mounted units are easily a cut above the rest, save for maybe the better magic classes. But as far as what the actual number one best class is a bit of a conundrum. You see, the issue is Master Knight a very limitedly available class? It is available for 2 units, Leaf and Lachesis, both of which promote to it from a personal class, which does sound very limited, but of course, this is a game from the days where everyone was fairly limited in what they could become. Genealogy also only has 2 Pegasus Knights, for example, and I would assume we all don't consider that to be a limited class. So yeah, it's a bit of a weird one, but just simply due to how sheerly ridiculous Master Knight is, I'm giving it a win. Let me just paint you a picture here. This is a horse riding class with very high stat caps and one of the most ridiculous toolkits the series has ever seen. Access to swords, lances, axes, bows, magic and staves is just absolutely ridiculous. And sure, Leaf and Lachesis aren't necessarily the best units in the game, but as a class, Master Knight is unparalleled. On paper, it might just be the best class we've ever had, to be honest, even if in practice it does have some tight competition. Thracia shrinks maps down again, and while that certainly doesn't mean flying units or mounting units are suddenly bad or anything, it does close the gap and allows a past winner in this video to sweep up its second title, Sages. Some of the absolute best weapons in Thracia are tomes, like for Seti, so being able to use that immediately puts a class in the spotlight. But what really sets Sages apart is the ability to use staves as well, which are hugely important in Thracia for the very utility. That leaves Dark Mages as their only competition really, since Mage Knights can't use staves, and stat-wise those just don't weigh up. They have more HP, sure, but their magic, skill, speed, defense and even movement is lower compared to Sages, which just really makes it no contest. As such, the fact that Light Magic does have a usable legendary weapon in the Book of Naga and Dark Magic does not, doesn't even really matter, but it is of course another small feather in the Sage's cap. In the Binding Blade, there is a funny little situation going on, where we have one of the biggest gulfs in quality seen so far in the series, with several classes being absolutely terrible, while others are really good. However, there are a couple very good classes that are all fighting for the title, and picking the winner really is not that easy. Both Swordmasters and Berserkers, for example, have some absolutely ridiculous bonuses that easily put them all the way up there in terms of viability. We're talking crit plus 30 here, that is absolutely obscene. But I think this is the game where we can no longer avoid picking that one class that is really up there in every game, simply because, well, its Binding Blade incarnation might just be the best version of all. I am of course talking about Paladins, the class that is so good they're up there in every game, and I have done my absolute best to avoid talking about them for every single title, even though they're a candidate every time. But here, I can no longer avoid it. With access to swords, lances and axes, Paladins are unmatched in Binding Blade and the best they've ever been. Because this viability comes on top of the general boons of mobility, good defenses, you know the drill. Just the option of having the entire weapon triangle in one class, and one that's already really good at that, is just something that goes far beyond what 30 plus crit can do for you. So yeah, I've managed to put it off so far, but Paladins have to win the Binding Blade. And they win in Blazing Blade too, even though all 3 former contestants have been nerfed in our second go around through Elite. Swordmasters and Berserkers have seen their crit bonus cut in half, and Paladins have lost their access to axes as suddenly as they gained it. So all 3 are not as good as they were in Binding Blade. But yeah, all that just means is that Paladins still stand alone at the top, just without their unique and ridiculously powerful kit, and now just sport a moderately powerful kit. In Sacred Stones, Paladins are most certainly still among the absolute best class in the game. I don't think that should surprise you. These years were really the absolute golden era of the Paladin, and Sacred Stones and his busted excuse for Jagen didn't exactly do much to change that. However, if I can reward another class coming close, I like to do so, and we actually have a very potent competitor here that comes close enough for me to declare it a winner, even though the answer of Paladin is also very much a fair one. I'm talking about bishops, who can turn into some absolute nukes by the end of the game. They have good stats, access to some of the best weapons in the game, and the skill Slayer, which allows them to do bonus damage against monsters, which Sacred Stones is absolutely filled to the brim with. Plus, you're always gonna want a staff user, and bishops can also just do that. It feels weird to say, because I think that in most games, bishops are actually quite poor, but in Sacred Stones, they're very much worth using. Are they better than paladins though? I think they're close enough to earn a diversity win. Which we're definitely gonna need, because I'm gonna keep Path of Radiance short, it's paladins. It's absolutely, without discussion or other serious option, paladins. Only Pegasus Knights come remotely close, but that's more because the units that are Pegasus Knights in the game are really good, rather than the class itself being good. The way paladins work in this game, with the weapon type being based on the class you promoted from, is not only super unique, it also means that you could literally have an army of paladins and still do perfectly fine due to the crazy amount of weapons you still have access to. No magic option, so it's not quite Master Knight yet, and you can only have 2 weapons at a time, so I wouldn't say it's better than Binding Blade and its free weapon Paladin either, but it's easily the best class in Path of Radiance, no discussion. In Radiant Dawn though, the Paladin class doesn't exist and is instead split up between its different weapon types, which definitely didn't work as well and leads to the game where Paladins are probably at their worst in the entire series. And that means we must shift our focus towards that other class type usually among the elites, Flyers. Even though Pegasus users impressed me more in Path of Radiance, it's without a doubt the Wyvern Lords, or Dragon Master as they're called in Radiant Dawn, that take the crown here. Har and Jill are both among the best units in the game, to the point that as long as you use them, you can get away with dragging some other draws along and it doesn't really matter. Wyverns also have an important advantage over Pegasus Knights in Radiant Dawn, as this is the only game that splits their tome weakness in half. Pegasi are still weak to wind, as usual, while Wyverns are weak to thunder, which is much rarer and so much less of a problem. Not that magic in general is good in Radiant Dawn, but that's besides the point. Oh, but do you know where magic is not bad? Where magic is so ridiculously overpowered, I'm willing to bet even casuals picked up on it. Our next game in line, Awakening. Dark magic in particular, with Nosferatu as borderline cheat code, is absolutely busted in Awakening, making this probably the least balanced Fire Emblem game of all. So take a guess what the best class is then. I mean, it's Sorcerer. Of course it's Sorcerer. Don't get me wrong, other classes can grant you some phenomenal skills, and Dark Flyer can even grant you Gale Force and use Dark Magic at the same time, but it has poor stats, and of course that infamous flying weakness that in this game doesn't outweigh the benefits gained when you can just pair a Sorcerer up with a flying unit. Sorcerer is definitely the better option, it's simply a way stronger class, and it has access to other useful tomes like Mire and Waste for utility as well, which Dark Flyers can't use. Now, Fire Emblem Fates gets a lot of flack, seemingly all the time, and I've definitely been critical of it myself. But it is a borderline miracle how this game, or games, have so many different classes, and yet there isn't really one that is clearly unbalanced. Several classes are clearly worse than the average, that's for sure, but I don't think Fates has a super obvious Awakening Sorcerer-like winner, and that is very impressive for the sheer number of classes it has. To be fair, that is because many of Fates' powerful units get their strength from their abilities and skills, but still. The classes are well balanced, and that's all I'm commenting on today, so kudos Fates. One still has the window, and my vote would go to Malik Knight, essentially Dark Flyer's more powerful cousin. And really, you should know the drill by now. Flying is a huge boon, magic is very competent in Fates, that combo in and of itself is monstrous, and the class is used by Camilla, one of the strongest units in the game, yet isn't unique to her, so it still counts. The class skills are also really good, especially Savage Blow is one of the most useful class skills in the game, I would argue. Still though, it's not perfect. It has low caps, which result in what I talked about earlier, preventing a potentially broken class from becoming broken. It's also definitely not the most widely available class, that's for sure, another downside, but one that I think is offset by having Camilla available. And of course we stay on Wyverns when we arrive at free houses. After Nosferatu in Awakening, this is probably the most well-known busted setup in Fire Emblem history, and yeah, for a good reason. It's gotten to the point where there was a time where basically for every character, becoming a Wyvern Lord was the best option, and beating the game with nearly only Wyverns was the best strategy. I do think that has changed a bit over the years, but the fact remains that literally every character does well as a Wyvern Lord, simply because the class is just very, very good. Great movement, great strength, bulky, fast, gets Canto. It's basically the perfect class for efficiency, which is obviously a quite important part of the game. It's not often that we're not punished for making every single unit the same class, but you could argue that is the case here. That's how good Wyvern Lords are in free houses. They're not without competition, I must say. Archer classes are also very good in Volan, for example, but they can't keep up with Wyverns when push comes to shove. And finally we have Engage, a game often compared to Fates, and in the class department that definitely tracks. Engage may not have the enormous list of classes Fates has, but it is incredibly well balanced, probably the best the series has ever seen. And that makes my job here very difficult, especially because we have a lot of outside factors that influence power, such as emblems, engravings, etc. There are so many different combinations you can make that it's very difficult to single out the role of the class in your success, if you get what I mean, but I'm gonna try. Flyers are definitely up there, as they almost always are, but I do think there are two better options available. The first is Hero, which excels in its immense utility. Full access to the weapon triangle is great for breaking, further bolstered by triangle adapt, and the skill Brave Assist makes it an absolute chain attack monster, meaning even units that aren't very good can contribute quite a lot by reclassing to Hero. And while Engage's classes are very well balanced, that is definitely not something every class can say. But there is one more class I personally think is slightly better, and that is the brand new Wolf Knight. Not only does it look really cool, it also has great movement, syncs well with several emblems for nasty chain attack purposes, and while its strength is low, its usage of daggers means it is, I would say, the easiest to snowball into an absolute monster of a unit. Using just a simple engraving, daggers can quite quickly become unhittable crit machines, and no class makes better uses of them than the Wolf Knight. So while heroes are definitely good as well, I think just how few steps Wolf Knights are removed from being really powerful compared to other classes who can also reach that but need more work makes Fire Emblem's weirdest mounted unit my winner. And that has been every single game. Do you agree or disagree with my picks? What do you consider the best classes in Fire Emblem? Share it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like and subscribe to the channel to stay updated on all my future Fire Emblem content coming up. For now, thanks for watching and enjoy the rest of your day.